He is the political analyst of choice across the CBS television station network of stations. He's a grand poobah. Get out of his way. He knows his stuff. He's also the political analyst at iHeartRadio and our former colleague at KGO Radio, Gary Dietrich, everyone. Hello, sir.
Happy early Thanksgiving, Mark.
Thank you, sir. You too. So, hey, let me ask you. We're talking to David Katz about the way that some of the blue states face off against Trump, and I was remembering or trying to remember the way in which Gavin Newsom dealt with Trump. And my recollection was that at least in the early going, that for all the bluster, that Trump and Newsom sort of got along. Can you fill in my memory on that?
Yeah, I think there was a major point in that relationship that really sort of defined it, and that was the Paradise Fire in Northern California, which dozens and dozens, the deadliest fire in California history. I mean, I think it was 85, 86 individuals lost their lives, and it was truly devastating. I was up there just before Trump and Newsom went up there together with, at that point, also outgoing Governor Jerry Brown. So it was a big deal. And I think, that's when the famous Trump line about, well, you need to rake the forest better and all that stuff. That's what got the headlines. But really what ended up happening was, I think these guys looked each other in the eye and said, look, this is not going to be good for either one of us if we look petty while this is going on, right? Because you remember that, Mark. I mean, that was just a devastating fire. It affected air quality in the Bay Area for weeks and weeks and weeks.
And you're right, the human devastation, people were incinerated in their cars as they try to get out of town. It was horrifying, yeah.
So I think that to me was the time when these guys kind of sized each other up and said, look, we don't like each other. We're on opposite sides of the fence on most things, but there's going to have to be stuff we work together on. And they did. They did fairly successfully for a large portion of that tenure.
So does that portend for Californians better things than perhaps the headlines would suggest? In other words, might Trump and Newsom be able to get to a decent working relationship without there having to be another devastating fire to make it happen?
Right. Well, I would certainly hope that the precursor term, right? I mean, 4 years ago, sort of set the table for, hey, you know what, we can do this if we want to. But there is a political dynamic, and of course there always is, Mark. In this case, there's two political dynamics, and how these are going to play out for these two guys is anybody's guess yet. Here it is. Trump is going to be a lame duck from the moment he comes in, right? In other words, he cannot run again. So that's going to mean a lot of things, but it's also going to mean there's no election out there in front of him that he has to be concerned about. We don't know how that's going to play out. Is he going to play more fast and loose because of that? Or is it going to be, hey, I want to build a legacy? We don't know yet. Secondly, for Newsom, there's no secret any place, including in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. It doesn't matter where you are in the country. Gavin Newsom wants to run for president. In fact, already is, as I tell people. So how is that going to play out? I mean, he's a lot closer to that goal, that ambition, than he was first time around, right? So I think those two conflicting political scenarios, are going to really be a wild card in what happens this time around for Newsom and for Trump.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a high stakes political back and forth. I want to follow up on the lame duck thing. Can you run out for us how lame duck presidencies generally go down and in terms of the power shift and the power structure? Because there's a lot of leverage, you'd think, with him controlling both bodies, House and Senate. He's got the Supreme Court, obviously, in his corner, it would seem. But explain to me just the dynamics of Washington with the lame duck presidency.
Right. Well, the tipping point in any presidency is always the midterm election. All right, that's the big fulcrum point for every 4-year presidential term. And, it comes as it does, of course, exactly in the middle. So for the next 2 years leading up to that midterm is when Trump can count on having the power that the voters granted he and the GOP on November 5th, right? After that, it's a complete wild card. We have absolutely no idea at this juncture. Anybody that tells you they know doesn't know, okay? Because there's no historical sort of trend line that definitively will tell you, Mark, well, what's the chances of Democrats taking back control of the House. Well, you know what? Actually, fairly good, given the fact that the Republicans look like they're going to have 221 votes. They need a bare minimum of 218. Do the math. That's exceptionally close. Going to be tougher in the Senate for the Democrats because Republicans, to take back control, the Republicans do not have enough vulnerable seats in 2 years in the Senate to make that look likely. But weird things happen in midterm elections. Typically, as you know, Mark, midterms are not kind to the current occupant of the White House, especially in a second term. So that's why I think to tie current, like today, together with 2 years from now, that's why I think you've seen the Trump team move so exceptionally fast to get their team in place. They know this. And so, they know that, come 2 years from now, it may be a completely different ballgame. I think that's why you've seen a cabinet appointed in near record time in the modern era. They're prepared to move quickly because they know what's coming.
Yeah, it is remarkable how quickly they've moved. And so to that cabinet and the clear ways in which the Trump administration, incoming administration, won't play ball with any existing process or understanding or custom or the ways in which these transitions typically go. So specifically, they won't sign the ethics agreement. They aren't committed to the financial disclosure agreement. All of this stuff, they're just, honestly, kind of flipping the bird to the way in which things were done. And we can spin it. I'm sure there are people on the right who spin it, the Bannons of this world, et cetera, who are like in MAGA Nation and go, yeah, that's what's great about Trump. He doesn't play by the rules. And, these rules in Washington, they need to be shaken up, et cetera. But, denying any FBI background checks or background checks for his nominees, that's an extraordinary thing, especially given the fact that we're talking about high-level security clearance that is typically granted to those who are getting these positions.
Yeah. Well, he starts out in better position with some of the obvious names, like Rubio, right? He's already been on the Senate Intelligence Committee. His security clearance is done, right? That was done. Tulsi Gabbard's been in Congress before. There's several other members of the House that are going to be serving. So some of these people have been vetted, right, through both the electoral process and by deem of serving in Congress. Others who come from outside won't be. But the FBI process, just take that for example. To our prior point, Mark, I think the main reason that was done, and people, again, on both sides are going to spin this different ways, but I think it was just simply to be expeditious, right? You start an FBI background check, that doesn't happen in a day or even a week. That takes weeks. Sometimes, depending on how complex it is and how challenging it becomes, it can take a lot longer than that. And I think that was some of the initial hesitancy by the Trump people, plus just throw in here the obvious. There's a lot of mistrust between Trump and his people in the FBI for the reasons everybody knows. Russian conspiracy, all the rest of it. Biden laptop, whatever. All of that. And I think that's sort of the other backdrop of it, is that the trust level is very low currently.
It's so interesting, and I love that you framed this so perfectly, I think, because that really is the back and forth between the two sides. It's hard for me, objectively, to look at the Trump administration and Trump, who is sort of head of that parade, who jacked a bunch of top secret documents and took them to the bathroom at Mar-a-Lago and the ballroom there and the bedroom, and they're just everywhere. You're tripping over these secure documents on your way to other secure documents. But anyway, it's hard for me to think of these people as those who wouldn't need some kind of vetting. To see if there is sort of some relationship that might compromise their decision making. I include Tulsi Gabbard in that. She sat down with the dictator in Syria, Assad. So I love the way you frame it, Gary Dietrich. This is one of the great things about talking about with you, because you do see the two camps and how they line up the issues.
Well, I think the other thing about this is, there's no doubt that not going by sort of tradition, as you framed it, Mark, earlier, in some of this Trump appointment process and nomination process, et cetera. This stuff can come back to bite you. Let's just, some scenario 6 months from now, one of these high-level appointees, some real, bombshell comes out. Well, that could be a real problem, right? That can really hang up an administration, hang up a White House, hang up an agenda. So they better hope that and there's been, the word is they quote unquote did their own vetting process through some private, kind of things. I mean, I will say this. It became really clear to a lot of people in Washington then when this second young woman apparently came out and accused Matt Gaetz. I mean, it wasn't 24 hours before he was gone. I mean, and Trump had his new appointee, boom. I think there's going to be a very short leash for a lot of these people, including those that Trump gives his full throat of support. Supposedly he was making phone calls to individual senators, right, just a day or two before Gaetz stepped aside. So, but I think there's going to be, as it seemingly is for Donald Trump on a regular basis, right? That's kind of how he operated in business. You're going to have a short leash, and if if you cross-eye him, you're probably gone. I don't think there's going to be a lot of hand-wringing about it.
I don't think he likes stuff that makes him look bad at all. So his tolerance for controversy, I think, might be high, but at the end of it, if there's too much of a stink that looks like it might get on him, yeah, he seems to jump to it pretty quickly. Hey, did you see that, among the things that Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to be doing is reviewing waste in government with Vivek and Elon. And again, you need the House for funding, right? And for the disbursement of funds, et cetera, appropriation of money. And so her working with them, you kind of have their little team that will, again, propose action on conclusions they've made about where waste is. So one of the things that I thought was controversial, I'd love your overall remarks about that, but one of the things that jumped out was, because I think this is sort of a sacred cow, sort of libs maybe, is NPR. And Marjorie Taylor Greene has identified NPR as a propaganda machine for the left. And she's at least right now, throwing heat about NPR being one of the things that will be on the chopping block. So I'm curious what you think overall, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Vivek and Elon, and then singling out NPR.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go in reverse order here. I'm going to flip it around. I'm going to flip the telescope around and start with NPR and then MTG, as they call it back there, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and then the larger Vivek Elon effort. Okay, I'll do these real quick. NPR has been under the microscope for a long, long time for Republicans. I mean, decades. This did not start with Marjorie Taylor Greene or Elon or Vivek. You may know this goes way back. The Republicans have often felt like, what are we giving public dollars to an entity that we perceive to be pretty left-leaning to a large degree, all right? Now, whether you agree with that or not, that's been the perspective. Some would say miraculously, some would say because Congress says not so fast, whatever. NPR is still here. It's still receiving public funds. Is that going to happen overnight and they're going to vaporize? If you go by history over the last several decades, you'd have to say no. Marjorie Taylor Greene, let's go to the next step. Look, she is going to be in line with dozens and dozens of people, even Democrats now saying, hey, you know what? Even Senator Coons, you know what? There's some of this waste, fraud, and root stuff. Yeah, I'd like to go. I think they are going to be sort of a power couple in Washington. That is Elon and Vivek. Who doesn't want to go back to the district and say, yeah, we cut out a bunch of pork, from somebody else's state or district or whatever, right? I think this is going to be a little cause du jour, and everybody's going to be trying to grab a little piece of the action. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I just think she's in line with a whole bunch of other people. She is not going to be the lead in the House on this. And last minute, to just say that more broadly, you kind of have that's a pretty nice gig when you get to be the ones that go around with the red pencil and say, well, I don't like this, I don't like that, but you don't have to really rustle up the votes in Congress. They're going to be a quote unquote department, but they're going to function separate and apart from the federal government. So let's see, but I just think right now, man, that's a bright, shiny object that a lot of people in Washington just love to adore.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, because there are two sides to it. It has no real power, that bright, shiny object. But, you get enough House members behind you or, rallying around it. But the other thing, and I love that you referenced it, is it can't be in my district that you're cutting. And there's a lot of this stuff, and there's a lot of pork, and that's the way stuff gets through in Washington, that is directed at a lot of different districts. I'll just pick out defense spending. One of the reasons the defense budget is so bloated is that they take care of all 50 states. They make sure that there's a little something for everybody. And so it's a little harder to cut their budget. But wow, if they went after the Pentagon, I'd be even I would be impressed. And I'm no friend to either one of those guys, but I would be. Hey, Gary, I want to thank you for for jumping on to our show the way you have this year. It's really this is kind of the end of the year, and it means a lot. And when we first started, we didn't have a ton of people here. We thought we were doing a good thing and people would find us. And now we've got some momentum, and I'm hoping for more momentum into the next year. But part of that success in our evolution has been your participation. And I really want you to know I appreciate it. Thank you.
I really appreciate it, Mark. And you guys are doing a fantastic job. I mean, you, Kim, Tony, you guys have kept at it. I think you're going to have an audience. I really do. Because, you like to shine the bright light on Mr. Trump, President Trump, and a lot of others. And there's going to be a lot of people looking for that. And you know this very well, Mark. The trend line, I mean, yes, I'm in the so-called traditional linear media, CBS, iHeart, and all that. But the trend for especially a younger demographic is to get their news and information through online sources, podcasts, shows like this. So you're well positioned, as we say, Mark, as you know, in the media biz.
It is true that we feel like we're on the right platform for growth. So we will see. Again, thank you, my friend. We'll talk next Monday. Gary Dietrich, everybody. Bye, Gary.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Gary's segment is sponsored by Bill Campbell at Remax Gold, by the way. If you're relocating into or from Northern California, Bill is such an expert, and you need a highly respected real estate professional and expert to help you. So text him, call him. Bill Campbell, Remax Gold, the number. You can see it there, 530-448-7474, 530-448-7474. Bill Campbell at Remax Gold. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.